sorry I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
He came, he saw, he died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, Ben, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, you guys, look here. You already know that this is the fact that Gareth Porter is my favorite reporter. I've interviewed him a couple of 100-something times now. And he's the author of the book Perils of Dominance, about America's tragic war in Vietnam. And, of course, he wrote the book Manufactured Crisis, The Truth Behind the Iran Nuclear Scare. And he writes all over the place, truthout.org, most often, also the American Conservative magazine. And if I could just find the tab here it is. It's consortiumnews.com, another dodgy British dossier, the Skripal Case. Skripal Case. Skripal. Hey, welcome back to the show. How's it going?
It's fine. Thanks very much, Scott. Good to be back.
Good deal, man. Happy to have you here. So, what's a Skripal?
Yeah, Sergei Skripal and Yulia Skripal, the Salisbury poisoning is a short way to put it, obviously, in the UK.
Yeah, is this the one where it was definitely the Russians and they used the most deadly poison known to mankind, and this former Russian spy and his daughter both survived, and now everything's fine and never mind and nobody cares anymore?
Well, I think that's an accurate depiction of it, except for I wouldn't quite put it that nobody cares anymore, because it obviously has had huge ripples, in global politics, especially with regard to the EU lining up with the UK government, the May government, in symbolically, but importantly, expelling Russian diplomats and basically saying, "Yeah, we're with you in this new Cold War," which now it's essentially being billed as a disinformation war or an information war, as the case may be. And I think that's really the crucial significance of this whole case.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you must have seen this thing in the Washington Post where Donald Trump, they said there are 3 foreign policies. There's what Congress wants, what the president wants, and maybe they meant the Pentagon, not the Congress. I don't know. What the president wants, and then what the executive branch wants. And basically the way they have it is, especially on Russia issues, the National Security Council, which is the principals, right, that they are just outright insubordinate. Just like we saw Rex Tillerson contradicting Trump on whether we're what even the mission is in Syria and this kind of thing. But in this case, according to the Post anyway, Trump thought he was agreeing to kick out a few ambassadors if the British and the French were going to kick out a few, or not ambassadors, but diplomatic staff and whatever. If they were going to kick out a few, he would kick out a few. And so basically they tricked him into kicking out 56, which was equivalent to those kicked out by the entire European Union, when all he ever wanted to do was match England or France, who kicked out 4 each. And so Trump did this huge thing where he kicked out 56 Russians in this huge thing that was like the biggest one ever, including during the battle days of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And this huge escalation that was over the president's explicit orders, apparently, or, they basically fooled him into it in a way.
Yeah, I think that's totally plausible. It's of a piece with the entire, history of Trump's sort of relationship of sort of dueling with the national security machinery. And this, of course, has particularly to do with Afghanistan and Syria, where, the the differences between them have become matters of public record over and over again. And it's really one of the most fascinating exercises or case studies, if you will, in the whole history of what I've always regarded as the inherent conflict between any president, between the interests of any president and the interests of the national security state.
Yeah.
And Trump, I think, is particularly a particularly dramatic case because he comes out of this background of not really being beholden to the national security state or either of the two parties, and so he's a wild card, and that is really the reason for this series of issues that have come up, including Russia, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, and, in that same article, they basically announced that they've canceled or they're delaying indefinitely his direct invitation to Putin to come to D.C. That's not happening anytime soon, they said. I mean, I don't know. I'm not naive, but at the same time, he is the president. He can continue firing people until he finds somebody who's going to follow their orders. Right? I said I wanted to invite the president of Russia. Your job is scheduling it, not getting in my way. You're fired.
Yeah.
Right? Until you get to the guy who will do his job.
That's true, and we're in for more drama. There's no question in my mind about that. Absolutely. Now, I don't want to get into North Korea, but it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out for sure in the next weeks.
Hey, all, Scott here. Here's how to support the show. First of all, buy my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. The audiobook is now available. If you like this show, you'll love the audiobook, I guess, or something. Sign up at patreon.com. You want to incentivize me to do more interviews all the time? Sign up at patreon.com. And through the magic of multiplication tables, I'll make a living doing anti-government propaganda for you here. Sign up for my YouTube channel. It happened, finally. We're living in the future now where it's a done thing. All 4,600 and something interviews are up at youtube.com/Scott Horton Show. Thank you for your decade worth of patience on that issue. And hey, sign up for the RSS feeds at scotthorton.org or at Libertarian Institute. We got a lot of other great podcasts there at the Libertarian Institute as well. So check all that out. And then find out all about how to donate to the show at scotthorton.org/donate. For your PayPal kind of one-off donations, for $20, you can get the audio book. For $50, I'll send you a signed copy of the paperback of Fool's Errand. For a $100 donation to the show, you get a silver QR code commodity disc. It's the coolest kind of currency I've ever heard of. And anyone who donates, and this is just for this month only for what's left of it, anyone who donates $100 or more to the Scott Horton Show gets a lifetime subscription to Listen and Think Libertarian audiobooks. Find out all about that at scotthorton.org. And yes, I accept Zencash and Bitcoin Cash and Litecoins and all those different kinds of digital currencies there as well. If you hate holding on to those digital currencies and you want to get rid of them all, send them to me. And hey, if you read the book and you liked it, or you listened to the audiobook and you liked it, or if you like the show, give me a good review on Amazon, on Audible, on iTunes and Stitcher and those kinds of things. Because, I don't know, somebody said that helps or something. Thanks. All right, so now you agreed with me when I summarized the narrative here, but you don't seem to agree with the narrative at all in terms of what happened to this former Russian spy and his daughter here. So tell us in detail, I guess, or not too much, but give us in brief exactly what's the accusations beyond whatever it is I said that you think you need to mention, and then tell us why you ain't having it.
Well, I did two pieces, of course, on this subject at Consortium News. The first one being an examination of or an analysis, I should say, of the May government's argument that there is no alternative to what they say is what happened. That is that this has to be a Russian government aggressive action on British soil using a chemical weapon for the first time since World War II. It's a very dramatic, obviously, presentation of what they claim is Russian aggression against the UK. And what I mean, I think the main point that I made, if I can try to sort of boil it down here, is that there is a history here which shows very clearly that that's not the only possible explanation for, assuming for the moment, okay, that this was indeed a nerve agent poisoning. And I'm prepared to accept that that is the case, although, you can come up with conspiracy theories that explain it away, but I'm prepared to accept that there was.
What about even simpler explanations that explain it away? Like maybe they just, I don't know, got some food poisoning or, I don't know. It seemed like if the people making the claims that it must be the Russians behind it are the same ones making the claims it must be a nerve agent, and yet they both survived, then it wasn't very good at blocking X enzyme, was it?
Right. So I mean, I'll get to that point in a few moments. Just to give the simplest answer, I mean, I'm suggesting that it could have been nerve agent which was 25, 30 years old and had lost its potency.
Was this stuff that Ronald Reagan had sold to Saddam Hussein, Gareth? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, let me put that subject off for a moment and come back to the key point that I'm prepared to accept that that Porton Down, the British military laboratory, was in this case reasonably honest, simply for the simple reason that they did in fact resist pressure from Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary of the UK, to agree that this was in fact something that was produced in Russia and that they knew it, and they refused to do that, and they would only agree to a vague formula that it's a chemical agent or a nerve agent of a type that was developed in Russia, which means that structurally it's similar to it. So I was prepared to accept that because I doubt that Porton Down would have sort of lied about the fact that they found something there that was indicative of a kind of a nerve agent in a general sense, of a generic sort. But even given that, the key point that I want to make is that I presented the evidence from a source which is not a pro-Putin source, but rather, one could argue, an anti-Putin Russian source, Novaya Gazeta, a newspaper in Russia, that there was a murder of a Russian banker in 1995, which used the nerve agent that was known. In fact, it was known that it was nerve agent that had been developed during the Soviet period, and that, in short, the storyline was that the guy who was the chief scientist in the development of what was then called the Novichok line of nerve agents had, at the end of the Soviet period, when things were breaking down, actually, at the beginning, I should say, of the post-Soviet period, when the Russian economy was imploding and people were not being paid and everyone was scared to death of their economic future, he had stored some of this nerve agent in vials, in glass vials, in his garage, and he began selling it off to people who had organized crime connections in Russia, and some of that then turned up in the telephone. It was what was used to kill this Russian banker. So what I'm suggesting is that there were plenty of explanations that did not have to involve the Russian government carrying out an aggression against the UK, against Sergei Skripal, former, of course, a Russian spy who had become a double agent for the British, starting, if I remember, 1999 or 2000, perhaps, and had been discovered and was then arrested, put in jail, served 6 years in jail, and then was swapped by the Russian government for 10 undercover Russian agents in 2016. So the thesis that I'm presenting here is that we have to consider a wider range of possibilities here, including I suggested at the end of the first article that this could be something that was done by former colleagues of Skripal, including friends, neighbors, people who were associated with both the former friend of Skripal, whose daughter married Skripal, and the family of the young man who was about to get married to Skripal's daughter, Yulia. So there are a lot of connections here with people who are reported in tabloid articles in the UK to be very upset about Skripal and the approaching marriage or the proposed marriage of the daughter to this young man whose family was very upset about Skripal.
All right. Well, that makes a lot more sense than Putin did it, frankly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just don't see the logic of Putin engineering a poisoning with nerve agent that would easily be linked to Russia. Obviously, would be linked to Russia.
Yeah.
On the eve practically of his election, and before Russia was to host an important sporting event, the World, FIFA football event in Russia. So
you know what your problem is, Gareth, is you're just not begging the question. You're supposed to start with everything bad in the world is because of the devil Putin until it's finally disproved 100%. That's it.
Look,
in fact, I saw on Twitter this morning where the resistance is saying that Vladimir Putin has engineered this dastardly peace in Korea in order to boost Trump's prospects in the midterms.
Yeah, right. This is the kind of conspiracy thinking that I reject. Absolutely. I think that.
Let me tell you one thing actually that's serious real quick, and then you say your thing. I interviewed a professor of organic chemistry from Cornell University, and he said anybody can make this stuff. Anybody with a lab who knows about organic chemistry can make these poisons. There's nothing fancy or scientific or extraterrestrial about them at all. And then this is a question for you. Isn't it the case that this guy published in his book? Did you already mention that? That he published, here's how you make it. This is the compound. This is the recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt that it can be manufactured by any state and a lot of non-state actors. I wouldn't doubt that. I was just pointing to a much more close connection here between the poisoning of the Skripals and a very highly plausible alternative to the official government action against them. And I mean, some of the people commenting on my article said, well, you're not taking into account the possibility that Putin could have used organized crime figures to do it on his behalf, and it wouldn't be directly connected with them. But that doesn't really solve the problem that it simply wasn't in Putin's interest. I mean, the only explanations that have been offered by the British and their supporters has been that, well, this was really a signal by Putin that he is ready to heighten tensions with Britain and basically have a new Cold War with Britain. Well, why? What's the point? Why would he want to do that? Supposedly it's because he's so aggressive that he is signaling the British that he's ready to go on the offensive all over the world, and that this is a signal to them that they better watch out.
Let me ask you something, Gareth. I got a real problem here, man. This really is almost like Iraq War II in 2002 and 3, where, Pat Buchanan says he ain't buying it, but basically everyone in D.C. but you and him are in on this. You know, nobody doubts at all that Putin is on his way somewhere and that somebody better stop him. I mean, this narrative is absolutely just as embedded as it could be.
I agree. This is highly dangerous. It takes us into uncharted territory. The resistance to this is so feeble, so small, that the people who are behind it, the people who are supporting it 100%, have a great deal of power to move things toward a disastrous set of consequences. And that to my mind, is indeed the most serious problem that we face, and something that requires the most careful thought and really concerted effort among people who are smart enough to see through this, to try to do the best that we can to try to resist.
I mean, it just seems like if people would abandon their partisanship for a moment and then just try to learn what they can and sort of be objective about this without, I mean, it seems like that's the biggest part of it at all, that obscures everything, is whose side are you on in terms of American politics. But
partisanship certainly is part of this, no doubt about it. I mean,
certainly anybody who's been reading antiwar.com for the last 10 or 15 years knows that America started the Cold War with Russia. I mean, why in the hell would Pat Buchanan be on our side on this when he's such a cold warrior that to this day he justifies the Vietnam War 100%, right? But that was communism. That was Soviet communism. That was the USSR that occupied Eastern Europe. That's gone. And you listen to him now, he sounds just like you, that hey, there's no reason we need to be picking this fight, and it is us picking this fight.
Right, and just to come back to the point you were making, that partisanship is a problem. I agree with that. That's a key element of this entire problem. But on the other hand, I continue to come back to the fact that there are powerful bureaucratic economic interests who are clearly involved in pushing this line. And it's both the military-industrial complex and the intelligence element of the war state, whose interests are very seriously engaged in pushing the idea of a new Cold War, the necessity of a new Cold War with Russia, because supposedly the Russians are so much on the warpath, so aggressive that this is even worse, as some argue, even worse than the Soviet Union.
Well, yeah. Say a bunch of people who know nothing about the Soviet Union, apparently. Man, and you know what? Here's the thing, too, and this can never be overestimated, is that dish soap sales and ads for dish soap go way, way up. The prices of ads for dish soap go way, way up during these international crises. And, every one of these CNN hairdos is constantly chomping at the bit for any crisis, whatever it could possibly be, because that's their job, is making you afraid so you watch longer, so you buy more dish soap.
Yeah, and of course, this, the CNN, MSNBC people, I mean, they've all hired these former CIA officials, all the way from the head of it, the former head of it, to acting head of it, to basically low-level analysts who have wormed their way into television, and these people guarantee that we're going to get a steady diet of the official line on the new Cold War for the foreseeable future. It's, in other words, the system has it's on steroids now compared to what it was a few years ago.
Right. Well, for regular people, I mean, you just have to ask yourself, is a foreign government the target of all of these accusations? If the answer is yes, then you could pretty much chalk up pretty much go with skepticism right there. America's the world empire, not Russia or China or India or the Taliban, This is global hegemony here, people, and the Russians stand in the way of that. To pretend it's the other way around is to just admit you know nothing of the last 25 years or 50.
Yeah, as you know, and very few other people do know, my book on Vietnam basically made the point that there was no balance of power during the early period of the Cold War, from the early 50s into the mid 60s. The United States had unparalleled power, primarily but not exclusively because of its nuclear weapons. Not the fact that it had the only nuclear weapons, but it had the only first strike capability. The Soviets did not have a second strike capability. They were unable to deter the United States effectively. And even though the United States, the government was not ready to go to nuclear war, they believed that they had the ability to push themselves forward anywhere in the world. And of course, Vietnam presented the opportunity to do that. And they, as I document in my book, the premise of the Vietnam War in 1964-65 was that the North Vietnamese and their Chinese allies would not dare to resist the United States putting troops in and trying to put down the rebellion because of the U.S. Supremacy in terms of nuclear weapons primarily, and supremacy in conventional weapons secondarily. So I just want to make the key point here that the balance of power does make a difference. And today, it's true that Russia has a much more capable military, and compared to the Soviet Union, it is indeed the Soviet Union during that early Cold War period, it is indeed more powerful, and there is more of a balance of power today than there was during the Cold War. But you are correct. The United States still is the only power in the world that can project its military power anywhere, and somehow believes that it can still be in a position to wage war everywhere on Earth.
All right, guys, here's who supports this show. The War State by Mike Swanson, the great Mike Swanson. He'll give you great investment advice, too, at wallstreetwindow.com. His book, The War State, is about the rise of the military-industrial complex after World War II in the Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy administrations. You'll learn a hell of a lot. It's really great. And again, wallstreetwindow.com to find out what he thinks you need to do with your money in these volatile times. And I'm sure some of what he'll tell you is you got to have at least some percentage of your savings in precious metals. And when you go to get your precious metals, you go to Roberts & Roberts Brokerage Inc. That's rrbi.co. rrbi.co. And if you buy with Bitcoin, they take no premium at all. Of course, then there's Zencash, zensystem.io, to read all about how it works. It's a brand new digital currency. It's also a format for sending encrypted messages and documents, and has all kinds of great things going for it. I know digital cash people who really think it's great. Zencash at zensystem.io. And Hussein Badakhshani is back. He wrote this great book, No Dev, No Ops, No IT. And it's about how to run your technology business like a libertarian. No Dev, No Ops, No IT by Hussein Badakhshani. And expanddesigns.com. You want a brand new website? 2018 model looks good for everybody for looking at. You go to expanddesigns.com/Scott and you save $500. Well, I guess I've felt like this for a long time, but I'm kind of out of patience for the American people. After Manuel Noriega and David Koresh and Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi and Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin, who's buying this? That, oh, yeah, the world is just chock full of Hitlers. And if boy, just think if the USA wasn't here, we'd all be under their tyranny right now. I mean, clearly America's the aggressor, and this is a bunch of bullshit. Seriously, snap out of it. Whether you're left or right or young or old or black or white or town and country or anything. This is crazy. How could anybody still believe it? Hey, did you hear that there's a bad guy and we're going to go save the people from him? Really? In 2018? Come on.
Well, you know what? I think the reality is there's a lot of data that suggests or shows, I think I should say, that the political reality in the United States today in 2018 and the last few years really has been that the majority of the American people don't buy it. They do not buy these myths for the most part. Now, there's a lot of people who do. I mean, there's a big percentage of the American people who do buy it, no doubt about it. and they include people all the way from the left to the right. But
and from nobodies to the powerful too.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. But there is now arguably a majority of Americans who do not buy into the notion that we are threatened by everybody who the people that are selling this myth are arguing are threatening us, and that we must maintain our military in the Middle East, throughout the Middle East, and so on and so forth, and continue these wars endlessly. Most people now want this to come to an end, although they're uncertain about how to do it, how it can be done, and perhaps easily manipulated into saying, "Well, give us a little bit more time." But I think the patience of the American people is now coming to an end. I think that we are entering an era where a political figure coming forward with a very strong message to the effect that it's time to end this could very well, sort of run the table.
Yeah, could have been Ron. All right, listen, I'm sorry. I'm late, and I bet you're late too, but I got to ask you, say one thing. What do you think about Kim Jung Un and I forgot Moon? What's his name?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a very significant development. I've seen it coming, as you probably know. I've written about this, that President Moon, when he was elected, immediately went to work to promote both a peace agreement with Kim Jong Un on the Korean Peninsula, which we now see basically in the form of the North-South text that has been released. And Moon worked very hard on converting Trump to the position that he could and should have a peace with Kim Jong Un. He could reach an agreement with Kim Jong Un on denuclearization, and that's I believe an important part of how and why this has happened. This Trump-Kim summit meeting is going to take place. That doesn't mean that we're out of the woods by any means. Believe me, with John Bolton in there. He is already trying to undermine the summit to make sure it doesn't result in any real progress toward denuclearization agreement, and he could succeed. That could still happen, absolutely. But there is a chance at this moment still that could happen.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope so. I don't know. It sure looks like at this point, at least, they have a lot of face to lose if they don't come to some pretty good agreements somewhere. So whatever progress they make, I think, our attitude definitely should be, even if it's almost nothing, that it's great and let's build on that, because this is certainly ice broken at the very least,
Scott, I will reveal to you and your listeners that I am working on a piece on how John Bolton is trying to undermine Trump's reaching agreement with Kim Jong Un by leaks that are parallel, or a leak that is parallel to the leak that he did in 2004 to try to ensure that no international agreement would be reached by the EU or anybody else that could prevent the United States from having the military option against Iran. And so I see some history repeating itself here with John Bolton in the White House. I don't think he's doing this, of course, with Trump's approval. I think he's trying to do it on the sly, and I hope maybe I can cause a little bit of problem to that strategy.
Yeah, well, I also hope that. All right, I'll let you go, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate it. All right, you guys, that's the great Gareth Porter. Perils of Dominance about Vietnam, and Manufactured Crisis about Iran's civilian safeguarded nuclear program. And read all he writes at antiwar.com, original.antiwar.com/Gareth-Porter. All right, you know me, .org and stuff.